It is my privilege to have Linda Schatz share with us today. She's been on this journey longer than Austin has, and I was looking back. I think we may have started working last spring. I can't remember how long it's been we've been working together. Plus, you've been working three jobs on top of that. Yeah. So, Linda, introduce yourself. Tell everybody about a little bit about who you are.
Sure. I'm Linda Schatz. I'm a nurse by trade with over 40 years of experience. I did bedside nursing for about 25 years and moved into documentation integrity and started a consulting career back in like 2010. That opportunity took me from a bedside nurse to like an 80% increase in my salary, the first job. And quite frankly, I was really good at it. And I was poached from company to company about every 18 months, never had to apply for a job. So once I took my first consulting job in 2010, I never applied for a job and changed jobs about every 2 years. I landed at the advisory board company in Washington, D.C. in 2014 and built their middle revenue cycle. So I'm a nurse and I work in documentation and coding, so how hospitals are paid and quality. And I helped build that program from two of us clinical SMEs to about 10. And I'm here in Utah because Intermountain Healthcare happened to be my client. And guess what? Intermountain Healthcare wanted to buy me from the consulting firm. And so I relocated my family from Fargo to Utah and helped Intermountain rebuild their middle revenue cycle program. Lo and behold, my company in Washington, D.C., the advisory board group was bought by Optum. And about a year and a half later, Optum called me to come back. So much like Austin, I was that person like, wow, you want me to come back? Great. In this rebuild. And I worked in the consulting role for about 4 years, rebuilt everything, expanded the program, had great reviews. My billable was 80% my goal. For 4 years, I worked 120% on a billable. Well, let's talk work-life balance, right? That's not so great. So I moved to a different role in the sales enablement and became what they called a portfolio advisor. And if you know anything about Optum and you heard about 2023, right? Or whatever, maybe it was 2024. I don't know. It's been a blur. The last year and a half have been a blur. But after the Change Healthcare debacle and all of that, everything stopped and revenue was horrible and we couldn't sell anything. But here I was, this clinical person working between tech, services, all of this, and making data connections and doing this great work. And all the salespeople loved me. But Optum likes to lay people off. And I know there's a couple people that maybe work for Optum on here. And they do that. But like Austin said, I never expected it would be me, nor did any of my colleagues. So one thing I want you to know is keep true to yourself. To any organization you work for, if you're like me, you're a line on an Excel spreadsheet. And so here I was. I'm back in North Dakota for a family crisis. I have a 91-year-old stepdad and 88-year-old mom in need of assisted living. And I get this call from my boss's boss, and I just done this great upsell. Like we weren't selling anything, and I took this great upsell, and it was going to lead to potential outsourcing, like from a $30,000 contract to a multi-million-dollar contract. I get this call from my boss's boss thinking it's about this upsell. And she was letting me know my job was being eliminated and that I did need to work the next 2 weeks and I'd have 13 weeks of severance, but thank you, sorry, you're done. I had achieved at bonus time that year, I had one of the highest rankings. I'd gotten one of the highest bonuses. To Austin's point, they gave me $20,000 in stock options, which were not worth anything when they let me go. So here I am, right? And there's all of this this work, and if we offer you a job, you'll lose your severance. So to make this even worse, you guys, the day before I'm supposed to sign severance, I get a call from another leader saying, hey, I found you a role. And you can do the job you were doing and do this role for me, and I'll give you the same salary. But I need to take my stepdad for major surgery that I don't know he's going through, and I'm putting them in assisted living, and there's no way I can do all this. So now I'm faced with the fear. And so fear, false events, emotions appearing real. And I had some really good friends who said, are you making decisions based on faith or fear? Now, to tell you the truth about Optum, over the 5 years I worked for them this round, I tried to leave numerous times. My do not compete was written so strong that I would get job offers and they would look at my do not compete and say, no, we can't take you. So here I was stuck. I have to tell you that while this was the hardest 9 months of my life, it's also been the best. People that I knew reached out. I maintained those connections. I spent 2 months back in North Dakota taking care of my parents. I would have never been able to do that. I had Steve in my head telling me, just keep going forward. You're doing a good thing. You're valued. But I needed to be laid off to understand my true value. So I had a friend that reached out to me and offered me a chart review contract. I'm like, okay, great, I'll do it. You know, it was a decent number of pay. And just so you know, I'm the sole breadwinner for our family. My husband's retired. I have 4 children. I have a granddaughter and a single parent. So I have a lot of stressors, right? Aging parents, 16 hours away, blah, blah, blah. So I started this chart review job and they were blown away with what I came up with. So I'm getting some of my integrity back, getting some of myself back. The day before I was laid off, a former colleague reached out to me and said, are you happy, not happy? I'm like, not happy. He's like, Linda, I'm going to have a role the second half of the year. And we've all decided that you're the person we want. So I have this in the back of my head. This is all going to be okay. I'm not going to struggle. I'm going to get a job. Okay, if you can imagine from going from nursing to an 80% increase in one job, and I kept switching, I would apply for a job and they'd all want to know what my salary is. I wouldn't hear back. Too expensive. I listened to Steve. I listened to him. How do I have that salary conversation? I had an organization like Iodine. Iodine reached out to me. It's a middle revenue cycle AI. And they reached out to me. Can you apply for this job? I applied for it, heard nothing. 3 months later, a different recruiter reaches out to me. You should apply for this job. Your resume is impressive. And I looked at it, same job you didn't talk to me about 3 months ago. So I messaged him, said, could we send a 15-minute chat? So he does. We chat. He's like, I looked. You applied before. And I go, yeah. I'm assuming my resume wasn't bot proof. He goes, I know, it's your salary. And I go, oh, well, that's really interesting. Because you said my resume is so impressive and I'd be a good fit for this job, but what's wrong with my salary? We don't pay that much. Oh, so then it isn't about my resume, it's about the money. But you want my experience, which I've worked hard to obtain. So, I had him backpedaling. Steve, you don't know this? I got a call from them again last week for the same position that they turned me down and I turned them down. So I did the chart review job. Then I got a request to be a leader at a system out in New York. So I took that. You guys, it was a $32,000 a year pay cut for me. I was scared shitless. How am I going to keep all this up? Well, lo and behold, this AI firm now needs my time. And they said, we're not quite ready for you yet. So again, have the conversation. And I said, how are you going to pay me? And I said, is it 1099? Is it hourly? Oh, 1099. And we usually pay this. And I go, well, you do understand at 1099, I'm paying about 40% of that in taxes. So what I'm earning is less than what I'm making in this full-time interim job. So I negotiated $25 more an hour. You guys, he came back with 50 more than what the original conversation was. Like, I'm now valued. So I'm doing really good work out in New York. They want me to go full time and I negotiate salary. And then we had a big hiccup. And Steve was wonderful on Martin Luther King Day because I was in a panic. What do I do here? If I push them for money, and now the AI firm I'm interviewing for the job, they've got the full-time role. How is this going to play out? And I was worried about everybody else except for me. And I didn't want to say yes, knowing that I wasn't probably long-term going to take it. I was afraid to say no and lose it and not get the new job. And finally, I decided to put myself in the driver's seat and I accepted the role. After we renegotiated salary, Steve was right. They weren't going to get rid of me for $6 an hour.
Tell them about you gave them a price based on a 40-hour work week and they don't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, tell them
So who in
that.
the right mind? So the first time they gave me the job offer, so I'm hired through a consulting firm. I know, and I was I mean, I'm about as transparent as you can get. Like, it's probably one of my biggest faults because I tell the truth and the dirty, rotten truth. Um, I told her, I said, this is going to come down to salary. And I said, I don't know if my salary requirements are within your realm, but I know for a fact when I hired independent contractors, I was paying at least 20% over what I was paying them. So if you can do that, I can probably take the job. She comes back and says, oh no, we can't pay you more than what we're already paying Norwood. No, we can't do that. I said, okay, fine. We'll go month to month. My 6-month contract will be done in January. I'll go month to month and I'll start actively looking after the first of the year. So they called me back and they're like, what's the minimum you'll take? And I'm like, well, do I go halfway in between this? No, Linda, that's not enough. So I figured out what I needed for salary based on a 40-hour work week. They waited 3 weeks to give me my paperwork. They make their work week 37.5 hours. Never in my life have I worked 37 hours. And I respond to her and I go, how'd you come up with these numbers? And I did my hourly times 2080 equals this. And she's like, oh, we work 37.5 hours. And I responded, I was not aware. I'm currently working 45 to 50 hours a week, getting paid 40. That's all I said. As an HR person, wouldn't you be concerned that she's not going to take it now? And my recruiter at the interim job is like, just call your boss, talk to her. And I'm like, I've already done that. I shouldn't have to do that. And I was beside myself, absolutely beside myself. And so I sent her a message on Martin Luther King Day to say, hey, can we talk in the morning? And she's like, sure. So then I call my recruiter at the consulting firm or staffing firm like at 1. So I haven't heard from her. They need my drug test. They want this. They want that. I'm not going to get benefits for 2 months. I'm going to be without benefits for almost 3 months. I mean, I was freaked. And Mike's like, I'll take care of it. He said, I probably won't know anything till the end of the week, but yeah, they don't want to lose you for $6 an hour. I again felt like a line item on a spreadsheet. And, they came back with the offer and it's a stepwise, but the offer didn't come with the extra money that I'm supposed to get in the spring. And I'm supposed to get there's no dollar amount. So I reach back out, have it in writing. This is what I'm starting at. It said I was eligible for this 5% increase. I said I am receiving a 5% increase, which takes my salary to X. And then I asked for a date for this increase. Still couldn't get it. So I'm a little bit But in the meantime, I told Mike, I said, I'm wigged out, so I'm applying for jobs. He said, stop. Lo and behold, I didn't hear anything. So I'm working for this AI firm, and all of a sudden they're asking me for more and more time. And okay, I'm going to interview. So I have a pre-interview, and then I do this. I had to do a sales pitch, right? And I've never been so nervous in my entire life. My mouth was dry. I mean, I've educated, been in front of CEOs, physicians. I've done all kinds of public speaking. Never been this nervous. This was on what, Tuesday? I went perm in New York on the 24th of February. I interviewed for them the Tuesday prior to that, so the 18th. That Friday, they asked me what my salary requirements were. I went perm on Monday. On Tuesday, I worked with the HR person from Acasa's, the firm I'm going to, if you know anything AI. And Tuesday they call me, Wednesday they firm up the offer. I'm $5,000 below where I was at with a $5,000 sign-on bonus. Benefits that I can't even hardly fathom, unlimited PTO, health insurance that's reasonable. And on top of that, they've given me a significant stock option, which again, funny money, you never know, but it at least positions me for retirement. They're all excited for me to come on board. I'm now working for them 10 to 15 hours a week while I'm trying to close out this position. But remember, I had a third job, right? So I interviewed somebody because I have an open position out in New York. I interviewed somebody. I was blunt that there's things to deal with. She's like, yeah, this isn't for me. She emails me 2 days later and she's like, do you know any side gigs? Well, of course I have a side gig. So I'm doing chart reviews for a girlfriend of mine who's picking up on work, and I feel bad, right? Personal integrity, leaving her in a lurch. Well, guess what? The person that I interviewed with her, and she's taken over that side gig. My boss in New York, she's like, what am I going to do without you? And I go, well, Mary, what about Maddie from the other facility? You could replace her over there better than you could replace me. And she's doing all this extra stuff, and you might lose her if she wants to grow her career. So I'm starting to train Maddie tomorrow, and I have 9 more days to work, and I'm teeing this organization up for success. I left my girlfriend for success, and I'm moving into my dream job. Like you say karma's a you know what, but if this wasn't meant to be, and I will tell you that faith over fear. We were with my granddaughter, taking her to the museum down in Ogden, and my girlfriend who does life coaching, she comes by. Like, why did that happen? Why were Butch and April there? And she could see in my face that something was bothering me. And she said, Linda, faith. And I listened. And I am so happy to hopefully help you realize that what is meant to be will happen, but don't give up your integrity. Unfortunately, for many companies, we are line items on an Excel spreadsheet, and we have to understand what our gifts are. Reach out to your friends, your colleagues, whatever. I'm happy to do those things, but faith over fear has gotten me to where I feel so happy to be where I'm at. and that I will be able to eventually retire in my goal is 5 years to retire. So I'll pause there. It's kind of a long story, but it was a long journey.
So who has questions for Linda? By the way, you hear about New York and so forth, Linda, tell them where you did all the work.
Well, I did it all remote.
All remote.
Yeah. So I get up at 5:30 in the morning and I start in New York and I work in New York, and then I will block time. Like if this client, if Acasa needs me, my work is flexible enough that I just log off and I do things, but I never double work. Like I'm not clocking both jobs at the same time.
You're not an
But I do
attorney. You're
most
not
of
an
the
attorney.
Acasa work.
You're
Huh?
not you're not an attorney. Sorry, I don't think I have any
Right.
attorneys. I do have attorneys in the past. It was a joke. It wasn't that funny. Sorry for any attorney
No,
for
no, no. But I've always had to build time. So I think like an attorney, but I'm very cautious in making sure that I don't miss a meeting for one job. But most of my other work is outside. So what my hours in New York are 6 a.m. to 2:30. So that gives me from 2:30 to 8 or 9 or 10 to do other work. And the chart review work can all be done after hours. So everything is remote. Go ahead, Chris.
um
I
listen,
think Chris said, or go ahead.
actually I just asked who it was, unless
Yeah,
Chris has a question. Do you have a question, Chris?
I do. I do actually, and I missed that earlier, so I apologize. I moved over to my phone. You gave a really awesome acronym of fear, and I didn't write it down. Can you tell me the acronym of fear again, please?
False events or emotions appearing real.
Appearing real. Thank you very much.
It I I've trained so many staff to do what I do. So it for non-clinical people, um, I'm a nurse. So I can look at the clinical evidence in the record, and then I look at the words that the doctor writes and do they match. So it helps reimbursement, it helps quality, all of this. And I train people to do what I do. And as I've been educating across the nation for these last, 10 years, so many of the staff will say, can we just put a USB in your head and pull it out? Well, guess what we're doing with the AI firm? They're taking what's in my head, and it's like it's amazing, and it's fun, and I'm going to beat the competitors out there. Um, I should tell you, so was working with the AI team, right? And they showed me their mock-up of their tool, and I'm like, yeah, it really isn't that good. It's no better than 3M or Optum. And they showed it to a director somewhere else, and she rated it a 4.5 out of 10. So now I'm like, oh crap, I am not going to get this job because it's not any better. So I worked with the team. We spent about 4 hours restructuring the data and how it presented. So the day before I interviewed, or the week before I interviewed, I get this text from Jake from Acasa. It's like, Linda, we showed your mock-up to this director. She loved it in capital letters. Okay, loved it from an engineer, you guys? Come on. They don't say stuff like that. And it was like 180 flip. And then I'm on with the other developer, and she's like, oh my God, Lynn, I've never seen it. You should see the video. She was blown away. And I texted him, I said, if we can get this right, we can get everything right. We can beat them all because I know what they don't do. And I think that's what cemented me getting the job. I stayed true to this doesn't work and I'm sorry. And this is why she said that. But I've had to learn how to change how I speak. The other thing, Steve, and I don't know if I shared Jody Bach with you all. So when I lived in North Dakota, I met this gal named Jody Bach, Jodeebock. And she was in the corporate world. She writes one of her books is the 100% factor. And it's like a little thin. It's like a quick read. It's like Who Moved My Cheese? But she talks about potential versus capacity. So if somebody says you have potential, is it really a compliment? It means you're not there yet. But what's your capacity? So think about your capacity right now. You're dealing with a lot of stuff in the financial business. I tell you guys, I get it. I mean, it was hard. You know, it was really, really hard. But what's your capacity and what can you learn today? And can we grow your capacity? And some of the work I did with her years ago in Fargo has just stuck with me. But lean on those things. Steve is so good about regrounding me and helping me realize that I do have value. And I was doing a lot of self-depreciation. I was doing a lot of self-talk. Okay, this is all the job I'm going to have. It's going to be okay. It's going to be enough to get me through to retirement. I'm going to find a way to work. And if I have to work another job, I mean, I kept telling myself this was going to be enough. And to Austin's point, I've realized how depressed I've been the last several months. November, December, January. I didn't really want to leave the house. Didn't really want to go see people. Thanks, Steve. She's pretty cool. But I've been there. So keep plugging along, give yourself a break, do self-care. And probably for guys, that's a hard thing. Nobody thinks guys need self-care, but you do. I still get my nails done and never stopped. But any other questions or thoughts?
Liz has a question.
Yeah, I have two things that might be jumping off points. I wanted to ask, because I've worked three jobs at the same time, too. How long did you do that?
So I've been doing that since August.
Oh, wow. Oh my goodness. I did it
But
oof,
remember, I was working 120%. So for years, at my consulting firm at Optum, we were expected to work 45 hours a week. 80% of that was to be billable. So that's 36 hours, you guys. Travel time, meeting time is not billable time. I used to travel 95%. So I actually had managing directors saying, how do you meet your billable time? So I'm used to working 60 to 70 hours a week. That's what I've done for years.
oh my
I
goodness.
did it away from home. So I would work, you know, I'd leave for the airport at 3 a.m. on Monday and I'd get home late Friday night. So I had Saturday, Sunday to be present with my family. That work life became much worse when I worked remote.
Mm.
But juggling it is hard. You've got to take breaks, and I usually take Saturdays off. Saturdays, I don't work any job.
Mm.
Sunday, I might work. I try to keep my weekends sacred.
Nice. Oh, that's good. Because I only did it for 2 years. I've always been in IT. My second degree is actually in medical billing and coding.
Oh, cool.
But
I
when
might be able to help you.
yeah, oh, nice. Well, I used to be CMBS certified, and I did that. But while I was working medical billing, everyone would come to me with tech issues because they would like Epic. Epic would always have weird.
Epic sucks.
Oh yeah, yeah. And they would always come to me, and so that's how I kind of got my jump into IT because I was just the helper when it came to software. Um, but I actually had a wonderful experience being an art teacher for 2 years, and it was like a dream come true. It was fantastic, but I only paid 20K a year as a teacher. Like the amount the teachers get paid is ridiculous. But I did, so I taught in the morning. I did IT help desk at night, and then I was a tattoo artist on the weekends.
Oh, wow.
So I worked three
Pretty.
jobs at the same time too, and I don't know how you could do. I only did it for 2 years. I'm like, never again.
Well, that's a long time.
Mhm.
But, you know, you do what you have to do.
Right.
So anybody in IT, AI is booming.
It is.
I have to tell you, in the last 3 weeks, the number of recruiter hits that I've been getting, I think I told Steve, I mean, I've had 3 or 4 different AI firms reach out to me. I've had different director roles. And it's like, where were you the last 9 months?
Oh no. Yeah.
So,
So that jumps off into my second thing where I wanted to ask because AI is everywhere, and I have been so worried about being able to find new work with AI. And is remote work still a thing? Like I'm kind of out in the middle of nowhere. I've been applying to in-person jobs in Scotts Bluff, Nebraska, which is the next closest like civilized hub from us. It's like, is remote still around, and how much do we need to cooperate and work around AI instead of people?
well, I think my perspective of AI, it's booming, right? When I think about the medical field, so much of it is simply word phrase matching, and it's not true generative AI, and it's not good. And that's what Optum 3M and everyone is using. That's why we're seeing the denials that we are on the Medicare risk adjustment, to be honest. Generative AI is great. For those of you interested, it's come across my Facebook. University of Utah is offering I think it's a 5-week course, $1,700 for AI. Um, I'm thinking of my colleagues want me to give them the syllabus to see if I should do it, but they're using me for that. While I think there's been a push, especially government wise, bringing government employees back in, I don't think we will ever fully get rid of remote work. And I think people are recognizing, so just for concept, in 2019, I flew 225,000 miles, lower 48 states. I spent 200 nights in a hotel. I made Marriott Titanium and Hilton Diamond in 1 year because all of my work was client facing. COVID hit, we were able to do that same sort of work remotely. And in 2019, I was, I think, 36,000 miles away from Million Miler. Right now, I'm 23. So since 2019 and COVID, I have very rarely traveled. Do I think that there's some of my work that has to be doing remote? But I've been directing a staff of 10 in New York, and I've never met them face to face, never been on site. So I don't think remote is going away. But I think there's a place for it. So I would look for hybrid positions.
Mm.
And I think expanding your experience into understanding AI prompting, because what's out there that's growing. I mean, there's a competitor to Acasa that just got a huge funding. Like Acasa's last funding was 2 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and we're I think they told me we're valued at $1 billion right now at the firm, and we're still a startup.
You could still be considered a startup with that much? Wow.
We're still a startup.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Because with my husband's work, it's kind of hard to find a for sure in-person job because he's a pastor. So kind of like the military, if the church is in need and you have to move, you just pick up and move. So that's been interesting, but it's good to hear that remote is still alive and well.
I think I don't see it going away completely. I mean, Steve, I don't know what your thoughts are, but you aren't going to get certain positions back.
Mm.
Yeah, I think we're seeing, those who were remote before COVID are still remote. A lot of the, now just a side note, I go to the gym in the morning. I know you guys can't tell, but I talked to my IRS friends today at the gym, and they don't have a place for all the people that were called back. One of the IT people who worked remote, they are making room in the cafeteria to house people. They do not have the space. So thank you,
Yeah.
Liz. Next person is Jason. Jason has a question.
Hello, and it really is me this time. So,
It's the other
uh,
Jason.
The other Jason.
um, thank you very much for this talk. It's been very interesting. As I've spent a good chunk of my career working remotely, interestingly enough, and not just from the COVID shutdown where we were sent home to work over Citrix. Um, that said, remote is somewhat going away. I have a friend who this yesterday told me that he is resigning from his job because they moved from a hybrid work remotely for 3 days in office to
Five.
entirely in, yeah, 5 days a week in there. And since it's a hour hour plus long commute, he's not going to be able to do that. But I did notice that, I mean, wow, you've been through some terrible things here. And you mentioned that you had a strong non-compete clause with your prior job that really got you stuck. Is that still impacting you? I mean, I know that you're working now with AI and training, and do you strongly consider these when you're negotiating your salary or benefits?
Um, I actually think, I mean, so there's still the legal battle over do not competes, right? And can it be enforced, not enforceable? The first time I lost a job related to my do not compete, I did hire a lawyer, and my do not compete is not enforceable because it's too broad. So Optum says I can't work on anything, even if it's like anything where anybody uses any Optum product.
Hmm.
Basically, shuts me out of anything in healthcare, right? So in reality, even with the severance, so even with them laying me off, it's part of my severance package.
Hmm.
Acasa has a non-written agreement that they won't go because the people at Acasa are former advisory board employees. So former advisory board employees can come to Acasa and they don't do anything. And Optum's not going to do anything, right? They've got bigger fish to fry. They're not going to go after me. And my do not compete will end May 2nd. I'm starting March 25th. What am I going to accomplish in 35 days?
Hmm.
So it's, I'm not worried about it.
Okay.
But I think, I think other organizations used my do not compete to not pay my salary. They said, oh, we can't hire you because of your do not compete. I think they used it when they didn't need to. So if that helps, but
Okay. Thank you very much.
no problem. And I've heard that too. I've got some friends that work up at LH Harris or whatever it is, and they're all going into the office. And we live up here in Eden, and people don't want to make that commute every day. So I do see that some of that's happening, but I think there's a place. I think people take advantage of remote. Um, I think there's a statistic out there like 30 or 40% of people now have a second job. I don't know. Um, I think one of my colleagues or former colleagues, Jason Jobs, might have posted something about that. And how many of you are working another job? I'm like, I'm not going to answer that right now. Just
I'll
keep
s-
that on the down low.
I'll say that when I have worked remotely, I believe that I've put in more hours than normal because it's one of those,
It's
I just need to finish something up in the evening and it's only going to take me half an hour or an hour, and it's just going back downstairs.
I have never underworked any job that I've been at. I not who I am.
I'll just add in for a previous company that I worked for, we did a lot of study on remote and hybrid and all of that, and they're building this entire plan for their workers and like decades of data. I worked remote in 2001 for a company. So remote has been around for a lot longer than we think it is. Decades of data show that remote is more efficient. People do work longer. And even the people that have a second job or whatever would be people that would probably be moonlighting or doing something on the side anyway, because that's what they're driven to do. And so it's just as because everybody here is at the place where we're all, in leadership and stuff, and some point when we get back in jobs and stuff, like every bit of data I have ever seen going back decades is that remote is not less efficient, and people are not taking advantage of it in the ways that leaders are afraid that they are. So
The people taking advantage of it remote are the same people that would take advantage of it it's and that's their integrity as far as I'm concerned. I just feel so blessed to be able to have kind of covered the two, like covered this role and covered my friend. And like, even I talked to Mary, my boss, this morning, and she's like, well, so I'm going to call you next year because I want to come out to Utah to go skiing. So where should we go? And she's like, we need to stay in touch personally. To me, that's like, Steve, you know how afraid I was. What if she gets mad and she just fires me? I mean, that was my fear. Um, so I don't know.
Well, there's always a game plan. When we let people know, we prepare, just like here in job team, we prepare for the worst. Whether we call that fear, but what's the worst thing that could happen? Then we can go backward. What's the best? We need to get to the what's the best thing that can happen, And I remember when Linda and I were talking, it's like, Linda, we just need to have the conversation about that 40 hours versus 37 hours. You base it on 40, so let's increase the price to what the for it is for 37 and a half hours, and throw that, and let them ponder on it, versus assume we have to put our tail between our legs and walk away, or not walk away, but accept the conditions as they are.
I was ready to accept the conditions as they were and not push. And it was eating me alive. And it was really Steve saying it's a conversation, and yes, there's a risk, and you guys, with what they were paying, what Norwood was paying me, what I was asking for was 20% over. So what are they doing different other than they're giving me benefits? So that's a cost. But at a director level, more than likely my markup was 40%. And I didn't tell you the comment. So Norwood, I've got friends there, and I'd always wanted to go there to their consulting division, but they couldn't afford me. So in my really close friend, the staffing guy, Mike, got the job description, and he handed it to one of my best buddies, Jason, and he handed the job description, and Jason's like, well, that's a job for Schatz. And Mike looked at Jason and said, well, will she take a low enough salary for us to make money? And I did. But look where it got me. It got me through. And so I'm not angry. I'm really not angry about that comment. It just makes me realize that it's okay to hold firm in your value. And it took a lot of work, didn't it, Steve?
It did. And I mean, and our value is much, much more than what they're paying us. They're in the profit business. So we just need to realize that, besides our benefits, if we didn't add value, that they make a profit on us working, no matter whether it's through a staffing service or a contract service, we add value way beyond that. And that's why they pay us what they pay us, and our goal, in my opinion, is to get the most that that market will do for what we bring to the table, what we do for them. And that's where, um you know as Linda said, it's about how we've added value, what we've done in the past. And this is like a repeat of last couple weeks about understanding our value, and making sure we we've done our due diligence to let people know some of the things we've done. These people don't know us from Adam. Part of it is Linda's got to prove herself by doing some stuff and showing things, but sometimes we don't get that privilege. We just have to show some stats from the past and then have a conversation about that story. So, um, who else has a question? We've got about 6, 7 minutes left, and Linda's actually, I think, on New York time, so she's on lunch. So she's on
I'm
lunch,
on lunch.
and then she's going right back to work. I mean,
Yeah, I have a team meeting right after this to tell my staff I've resigned. So I
she,
didn't tell them last week. My boss was out. So I did, after my boss told me to tell the staff, the two staff that I'm closest to, I picked up the phone and did a personal call to let them know and that there's a transition plan in place. So to me, it's all about ensuring relationships. I would not have had these two opportunities if I didn't have the relationships I had before. I mean, my extra opportunities. So relationships are important, and I really try to never burn a bridge.
and Linda gets the privilege of doing that what your managers didn't get to do. Most of your managers sat in there and had to keep their mouth shut. Why the HR person presented them, or let's maybe you got it done over Zoom, over Zoom. But it happens. Um, any other buddy who, since I don't have time, I can't do everybody. Who else has a question? Who wants to ask Linda a question? Since there were some things that probably this triggered for somebody here. Just raise your hand.
And feel free to message me on LinkedIn or I don't know if there's a chat that Steve sends out, but if there's anything I can do to help you or whatever, let me know.
Okay, Dallas.
Thank you, Steve. This may be, a whole workshop in and of itself, but are there any small salary negotiation tips that you or Steve can offer us? I'm in the position where I'm sort of in a career transition, and so I would not be surprised if my salary went down. Right? I'm past that point in my career where I expect my salary to always be going up. Do you, when they say, what is your salary, do you try to kind of hedge and not share, like try to get them to say first, right? Like, do you say, hey, I'm not really comfortable sharing that. Would you, what's your budget?
So there was I only applied for jobs that were within, that the top was within 20% of what I was making, which was still a pretty hefty cut. I worked for consulting firms, you guys. I mean, my first job was a 40% or 80% increase. When I switched roles, I was often getting $20,000 to $30,000 more a year. And so when I'm looking at, and I was base plus bonus. So, when you're on a 20% bonus and you're achieving that a lot of years, that's a lot of dollars. So I only applied for jobs where the salary range looked reasonable. I didn't go way down. And I couldn't afford to. I couldn't afford to take that pay cut. Steve has some good salary negotiating tips. I think that could be a conversation. My problem was that they always wanted you to put a number in there. And that's hard. I don't know what thought you have, Steve.
No, I think Dallas almost was verbatim saying what I've taught him and others. So it sounds like he's been a good student, and but I don't want to play my card. I want to know what they've established for me, and I want to know what the market is for what it is that I do. Some of you are pivoting, and so let's just Liz said earlier said she's going to pivot maybe to do something different. Well, does that pivot pay more or less than what she made before? I know we think our number is our number. It may be more, it may be less. It depends on what the market will bear. And, I mean, I talked to some people, and like I told Linda, and I told Chris Hislop this last week. I said, Chris, I think, I think we can get what you made and more. I think we can, but we work for an employer. We don't know our value. Sometimes we are paid at the top dollar. We need to find a top dollar paying company again. Okay. maybe some of my Wells Fargo people, maybe that, they got paid top dollar and we just need to find a top payer. Goldman Sachs, I would expect they're a top payer as well, but to answer that question, it just depends. So maybe we should have that conversation again, Dallas. That's part of it, but I think Linda knew what she had to make, and she wasn't going to. How many of us? Okay, this is a conversation from last week, and I don't know who I was talking to, but it was about overtime. The people based their whole life on overtime, and then the overtime quit. And now what are they going to do? They can't pay their bills because they cut the overtime. And so just that, I think it's a great conversation to have. Maybe that's where we need to go, Dallas, next week, is to revisit that. Some people have dialed this in and got it down. It's working for them. I also think it's like kid gloves. You got to be a little careful with how that is, because for what Linda and I talked about, and Linda can expand a little more on this, it wasn't an ultimatum, but we did want to put our stake in the ground. And Linda was afraid she was going to lose the deal. And I said, no, we're not here. It's not an ultimatum, but we just wondered if we can come closer to this number. And then if they've made a decision and they want Linda, and they finally, I mean, so she didn't quite tell you, but this role she had before the other company came in and just hired her. She was the interim director, or what was your title?
I'm interim director at CHSLI.
And so
So
she was,
yeah, it'll
yeah,
take them 6 months to replace me.
she was the interim director through a staffing service, as they were still looking for a director, and they finally decided they didn't need to look any longer, but it took them 6 months for her to prove herself. Does that make sense? And then they kind of lowballed her, you
Yeah.
know?
And I
And
hate to run, Steve, but I got to jump on my staff meeting.
no, no, no problem at all. Linda, everybody give Linda a big, big round of applause. Thank you, Linda. And I know you're working, so thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And I'm going to end this recording and we'll stay on.